Hello again, everybody. This is John with BestPriceNutrition.com. We shot a couple videos recently, and there was an influx of questions. This one was pertaining to the whey protein concentrate isolate hydrolysate video we did. And a lot of the questions are they're redundant, so not that there's anything wrong with that. I just figured it'd be easier to answer them through another video. So on whey protein, questions we had were about really specifically people were a little bit confused on the methods for isolating whey protein. And as I mentioned in the other video, there's microfiltration, which is also called cross-flow microfiltration. That's just the patented process that's used by Glanbia. They own the patent. So anytime you see CFM or cross-flow microfiltration, that's what that means. It is microfiltering. Also, ultrafiltration is another term that you guys will see on labels. Where it differs is in the size of the pores on the ceramic filters that they're using. Both are done at a low temperature. Both are done where the pH is controlled. And the reason why that's important is because of denaturing the protein, which also brought up somebody saying, well, doesn't your body denature the protein? Your body denaturing protein, as opposed to, say, ion exchange, where you're adding chemical reagents and exploiting charges to separate out cholesterol, fat, and lactose, is that your body temperature is 98.6. This is done in excess of 160 degrees, and there's chemical reagents being used. So we know from research that the biological value of the protein and the actual native microfractions within whey are destroyed during ion exchange. Your body doesn't destroy those fractions. Your body is digesting them. So they're actually the exogenous process is completely different than what your body does endogenously in terms of denaturing a protein. Your body, and there's even peptides, for instance, that are resistant to digestion, so they reach different parts of your GI tract where they're going to be absorbed differently. So that's something to keep in mind there, because that came up as well. And as I mentioned, ion exchange whey protein isolate, that's the other method for isolating protein. It's far cheaper to do that than it is to microfilter a protein. So anytime you see whey protein isolate on a label, and it doesn't explicitly tell you, hey, it's microfiltered or cross-flow microfiltered, it's probably ion exchange. Otherwise, you'd say it's microfiltered. I can't say definitively every time, but if I were making a product, I'd make a point of saying that. It's a much better process for isolating whey protein. Also, other things to pay attention on labels: cold filtered, triple cold filtered, double cold filtered, any other really cool adjectives that sound good to you. That's marketing, okay? Yes, it's kind of redundant to say cross-flow, cold filtered, cross-flow microfiltered. It is done at a cooler temperature, so it's redundancy. So don't get caught up in all those adjectives that sometimes you'll see on labels to confuse you. Really look for the process that's being used. Whey protein concentrates, as I mentioned in the last video, those are fine. Some of you guys were confused on that. If you're not lactose intolerant and you could find a cross-flow microfiltered whey protein concentrate, great. If you don't mind the fat and the lactose doesn't bother you, that's totally fine. Those native fractions are preserved there. So there's nothing to worry about there. What makes it a concentrate versus an isolate is how much protein is there by percentage. 90% and above is typically considered an isolate. And whey concentrates can range from as low as 34%, I believe, all the way up to 89%, if you will. So that's something to pay attention to as well. And they've improved. My opinion is I like the microfiltered isolates better because they tend to mix better. They tend to taste better too. That's subjective though. So that's something else to consider. Let's see, other questions that we had. Oh, is whey protein isolate bad for you? That was a good one. There's a doctor online that's telling everybody that whey protein isolate is bad for you, and conveniently he sells whey protein concentrate, which also happens to be cheaper. There's absolutely no evidence of that. It's ridiculous. They're the same thing. It's just one has less fat and lactose. In fact, if you get a good isolate, it's lactose and fat-free virtually. So this notion that somehow whey protein isolates are bad for you or something is just completely made-up nonsense in order to sell a product for a charlatan. That's really what it comes down to. Also, organic and grass-fed doesn't mean anything. Most of the hormones are stored in the fat. Most of the fat is removed from the protein, especially if you buy an isolate. So paying for a grass-fed organic whey is a waste of money, truth be told. So if you want to, that's great, but you really don't have to. It's not as if we're talking about steaks. If we're talking about red meats and stuff like that, a grass-fed meat tend to have more omega-3 and biohydrogenated CLA. So that makes a difference. Even then, there's an argument that the grain-fed is still so low in polyunsaturated fats, especially omega-6, that it really doesn't make that much of a difference per se. But some people like the taste better, and there's some other arguments to be made. There's a debate to be had, in other words, when we're talking about red meats. Whey protein, no, not so much. Sorry. Absorption rates. Absorption rates don't really matter. And it's actually, hydrolysates don't necessarily absorb faster than isolates or concentrates for that matter. So Touched on last time in the last video the issues with hydrolysates. The degree of hydrolysis is not revealed. Those native fractions with all the benefits we mentioned in the last video are not realized because they're destroyed during the hydrolyzing process, and they cost more. So something else to consider. Another question we had was versus casein protein. Different rules apply to casein protein. Casein is also a dairy protein. In fact, we're talking about bovine milk. It's about 80% casein. Casein tends to be a little more filling, a little more satiating. It doesn't have these same effects, if you will, of whey. Casein's fine. You could take a whey and a casein, you could blend them separate. You could buy a powder that has both of them in there. That's fine too. So all the same rules don't necessarily apply to casein. They're different proteins, and they each have unique benefits. Last thing was on big box store whey protein. Sometimes you'll see whey protein at Walmart and stuff like that really cheap. Some of those are okay, some of them aren't. And here's what it comes down to. Like a Costco or one of these big box stores, they're going to go to a manufacturer and they're going to say, this is where our margin needs to be, this is how much we're going to pay for it. And then the manufacturer says, damn, I'd like to get in those stores. What do I got to do to reach that price point? You're probably not going to be getting the highest grade of protein because that consumer is not, I assume like most of you guys watching this video, that's going to know the difference between a microfiltered whey protein isolate and an ion exchange and know the varying degrees of concentrates and the methods used to concentrate a whey protein and so on and so forth. So that's something to consider. It's not that they're all bad, but there have been times where they have failed to meet label claims in the past. And if somebody's had, a lot of the times that I have digestive discomfort from whey, well, those are going to have some lactose in there, so you're probably somebody who's lactose intolerant. So if you want to use whey, you probably should invest in isolate, ideally a microfiltered or cross-flow microfiltered whey protein. So I hope I answered all your guys' questions on that. Again, these all came up in the comments section, so I wanted to hit those for you guys real quick. You can post more questions if you have them. I'll be happy to answer them. And also you can check us out at facebook.com/bestpricenutrition. Thank you for watching.